Readers were so fed up they started sending death threats to the author, driving the system crazy. In a fit of desperation, it dragged me straight into a heart-wrenching campus novel where everyone is miserable. The bound mission: protect the fragile female lead and rewrite her tragic fate, currently written in scars and sorrow. I pondered for a moment and had an epiphany. Why bother with constant vigilance and defensive protection? I'll just use romance to tie down the gorgeous, troublemaking villainess and strangle every tragic plotline at the root. I stared intensely at the cold and haughty Stella standing before me, a trace of envious drool nearly escaping the corner of my mouth. The girl sharply sensed my gaze. Her willow-arched brows knit together, and her eyes filled with impatience as she spoke in a chilling voice. "What the hell are you looking at?" "Looking for your mother." I gave a playful smirk, my mind made up to start a close-quarters harassment mode. To save the female lead, I have to take down the villainess first. Host, have you ever actually read a novel? System, present. So, it took about 10 minutes for me to finally grasp the situation. To put it simply, my scene in the original world had ended, meaning I was dead, croaked, finished. Now, I was inside a female-oriented campus romance novel. Because the female lead's experience was so miserable, it triggered a massive backlash from readers. Consequently, some incomprehensible higher power decided to modify the ending. So, they dispatched a system to grab my soul, which had been accidentally cleaned out of my world, and dragged me here. My mission was simple. As the book progresses toward the grand finale, I have to protect the original female lead, Chloe. I must ensure she isn't tormented until she's half dead or suffers through the horrific tragedies of the original script. Fine, I might as well make the best of it. A bad life is better than a good death. It's just being a bodyguard and saving a damsel in distress, right? How hard could it be? Besides, like many web novel protagonists, I'm an orphan with no strings attached. Dying in the old world was whatever. Maybe I'll live more comfortably in this one. What? You're asking if I never relied on myself because I had a girlfriend? To the brothers asking that, let me ask you, have you ever even seen a real girl, you lonely losers? Get out of here. Of course, I'm joking. Does a guy like me, Ethan, need to rely on stuff like that? A few days later, under the system's efficient arrangements, I smoothly completed the transfer procedures and pushed open the door to Class 3, Grade 11 at Shunghui Academy. Today was the day the original female lead, Chloe, transferred in. It was also the day her miserable life was set to begin. Chloe and I stood on the podium. The homeroom teacher stood there with a beaming smile, making the introductions, but the commotion from the students below was already starting to drown her out. Holy crap, is that new guy for real? He's so handsome. His looks are a total level suppression against our school hunk. Yeah, he's so hot. The girls whispered among themselves, their eyes practically glowing. I flashed a smile at the class. Please, did they really need to state the obvious? Is he smiling at me? He's clearly smiling at me. I wasn't surprised by their reaction at all. The boys weren't quiet either. The transfer girl is so pure. She's like a little white flower. Brothers, my youth has finally begun. Back off. I'm going to be the one to sweep her off her feet. The boys' eyes were glued to Chloe. Before entering, I had observed Chloe carefully. She was indeed beautiful, wearing a simple school uniform, head bowed, looking pitiful and afraid to cause trouble. The standard female lead setup. However, she wasn't my type. This pure, white lotus style didn't really suit my taste. I mean, my dating preferences. While the teacher was talking, my gaze swept across the room. Eventually, it moved past the crowd and landed on a girl in the middle of the classroom. She was resting her chin on one hand, her slightly wavy long hair draped over her shoulders. Her school blazer was casually left open, and her exquisite features carried a natural air of arrogance and rebellion. She was the living embodiment of a defiant, spicy pepper. I raised an eyebrow. This was the one who best matched the original description of the villainess, Stella. She was equally beautiful, though her personality in the book was quite unpleasant. To me, however, morality follows the face. Stella hit all my aesthetic buttons, or, as they say, she was exactly my type. Sensing my blatant stare, Stella frowned slightly. She coldly lifted her eyelids and gave me an extra look. Her gaze was full of scrutiny and warning. Not only did I not back down, but I also gave her a playful wink. After Chloe and I finished our self-introductions, the teacher quickly arranged our seats. Then came the normal lesson. To an adult soul who had struggled in society, sitting back in a classroom for 11th grade math was pure torture. Listening to the teacher's hypnotic lecture, I felt like the sky was falling. I never expected that the biggest obstacle to saving the female lead would be attending class. If I had to endure a whole day of this, who would have the energy to care about other people's business? Original author. Did you even go to high school? You idiot, get out. When the bell finally rang, I was in a state of semi-conscious daze. Just as I was about to collapse on my desk for a nap, I felt the atmosphere in the room shift. I looked up to see Stella already on her feet. She was marching toward Chloe's desk with an aggressive, "Don't mess with me" stride. Chloe, who was busy organizing her books with her head down, caught a glimpse of the approaching Stella and acted like a startled rabbit. Before Stella could even open her mouth, Chloe bolted upright and stammered, My stomach hurts. Going to the restroom." Then, she vanished like a gust of wind. I leaned back in my chair, feeling bewildered. It was the first day. The first period had just ended. The two of them hadn't even spoken a word. Why was this spicy pepper Stella already targeting the lead? This hostility was coming out of nowhere. How did the original book put it? The reaction of the boys to her looks made Stella feel like Chloe was stealing her spotlight. "You're not dead yet?" The system hadn't spoken for over 1,000 words. I thought its part was over. However, while I was criticizing the system in my head and staring straight at Stella, she turned around, venting the frustration of her target running away. She caught my direct gaze perfectly. Her bright, haughty face immediately flushed with anger, and she snapped at me irritably. "What the hell are you looking at?" "Looking for your mother." "Oh," aiming to fire at me now. I wasn't annoyed at all. Instead, I smirked and raised an eyebrow at her. "Mommy." As soon as those words left my mouth, grade 11 class 3 fell into a deathly silence. The students who hadn't gone to the restroom and were waiting for drama all turned their heads toward me. Their eyes were filled with shock and newfound respect. Stella was stunned. She froze on the spot, her beautiful eyes widening as if she couldn't believe her ears. From childhood until now, who would dare play such a shameless joke on a highborn young lady like her? "What did you just call me?" When she finally processed it, her fury peaked. She rushed to my desk and raised a slender leg, intending to kick me. Watching the leg fly toward me, I didn't dodge. Instead, I looked at her with extreme sincerity and blurted out, "You can kick me, but can you take your shoes off first? Also, if you aren't wearing white ankle socks, please take the socks off too." The sound of people gasping for air echoed through the classroom. Stella's leg froze midair. Her porcelain fair, gorgeous face instantly turned a burning crimson, the flush spreading all the way to her crystalline earlobes. Her usual arrogance was shattered by that one sentence, replaced by intense shame and indignation. You're shameless." "Shut up." She was so embarrassed and angry she was trembling. Without thinking, she leaned forward and used her soft, white hand to cover my mouth. Feeling the soft texture on my lips, I blinked. A mischievous idea popped into my head, and I stuck out my tongue, giving her palm a light lick. "Eek!" Stella reacted like a cat that had its tail stepped on, snatching her hand back as if she'd been electrocuted. She stared at her damp palm with wide eyes, her face full of disgust and frenzy. Then, she frantically rubbed her hand against the shoulder of my uniform, acting as if I were toxic. I nonchalantly patted the shoulder of my blazer. Watching her lose her mind, I added with a smile, "Your hand is quite soft." "You just wait." Stella gritted her teeth, her face so red it looked like it might drip blood. She stomped her foot and turned to flee the room. As I watched her retreating back, my smile hadn't even faded when a very discordant male voice reached my ears. "Your name is Ethan, right?" A guy with messy hair and decent looks, though his face was clouded with self-importance, rushed over and slammed his hand onto my desk. If I had to guess, this was the original male lead, Leo. Currently, it seemed Chloe had just arrived, and he hadn't had time to officially fall for her yet. For now, he was still playing the role of Stella's guardian. Leo looked down at me, his eyes full of justice and rage. "You're a man, yet you bully a female classmate the moment you transfer here? Your words are disgusting. Apologize to Stella right now." I looked up at him and gave a disdainful laugh. "Nice guys stand behind the dogs." Saying that, I stood up and shouldered past him, making him stumble. One of the main reasons for the original lead's misery was this idiot Leo, who wavered between the two girls. I wasn't going to give him an ounce of respect. Perhaps because the morning scene was too shocking, this CPU of this arrogant young lady had overheated. For the rest of the day, Stella was surprisingly quiet. She didn't look for trouble with Chloe. She didn't even look in Chloe's direction. However, during the lessons, I could occasionally feel a murderous gaze fixed on me. As for Leo, he was busy. Since Stella wasn't causing trouble, he spent the entire day trying to get Chloe's attention. Chloe was the textbook pure white flower, socially anxious and introverted. Faced with such sudden enthusiasm, she didn't know how to refuse. She could only blush and whisper, "Thank you." And Leo, while farming favor points with Chloe, he kept stealing glances at Stella to see if she was jealous. Ring. Accompanied by a retro school bell, the classroom instantly erupted. I stretched lazily, glanced at the wall clock, and lost it. 6 p.m. Did the author go to high school? What kind of high school lets out at 6 p.m.? Ending at 6 is more punctual than my old office job. Fine. Since it's 6 o'clock, I can go to an internet cafe for a few rounds of games. I slowly packed my bag, slung it over one shoulder, and strolled out of the school gates. Near Shanghui Academy, there was a small alleyway, a shortcut to my cheap rental apartment. The alley wasn't deep, but it was flanked by old red brick walls. I reached the middle of the alley and stopped. At the exit ahead, 7 or 8 guys were standing in a line, completely blocking the path. I squinted at them. Most wore school uniforms. A few were from Shanghui, but they had modified their clothes to look edgy. And in the very center of the group stood someone I expected, yet was still surprised to see. Stella. She wasn't wearing her proper school blazer anymore. Instead, she had changed into a black leather biker jacket over a tight white t-shirt. She wore slim-fit jeans that perfectly highlighted her long, straight legs. Wait, sister, we left school at the same time. When did you change? Yo, I stuffed my hands in my pockets and chuckled. If it isn't Stella Mommy. What's up? Bringing a bunch of shrimp soldiers and crab generals to block me instead? Ethan, you're asking for death. My words reignited her morning fury. Her face went cold, and she pointed at me, gritting her teeth. Humiliated? I widened my eyes in mock surprise. You feel humiliated because I called you mommy, or because I gave you a lick? Besides, I praised the softness of your hands. That was a compliment to your skincare routine. You should say thank you. Ew, you are absolutely shameless. Stella's chest heaved with anger. She turned to the guys behind her and screamed, "Hit him! Hit him hard!" The moment the sponsor gave the order, the guys got hyped. They cracked their knuckles and started closing in on me. Kid, you messed with Lady Stella. Today you've kicked a steel plate. The leader, a guy with bleached yellow hair, smirked arrogantly as his joints popped. I looked at the group surrounding me and let out a silent sigh. When it came to pure physical fitness and brawling, I wasn't afraid of anyone. But as the saying goes, even a master can't fend off a crowd, and 2 fists are no match for 16. These 7 or 8 punks were basically teenagers. But if they all rushed me at once swinging like wild animals, I might win, but I'd definitely walk away with some bruises. And I'm a guy who values cleanliness. If my school uniform got dirty, I have to wash it myself. Too much trouble. System, stop playing dead. I called out for backup in my mind. Host, I am currently initializing. Stop trying to be cute. Hurry up and hook me up with some legendary martial arts, or maybe mastery in Bajiquin or MMA. The more, the better. Ideally, something that lets me one-shot these brats. The system seemed to glitch for a second. Host, our mission is to save the female lead, not to turn you into a high school tyrant. Cut the crap, I interrupted irritably. These bastards are about to jump me. If I get crippled, how am I supposed to go to school tomorrow? If I don't go to school, how do I protect the girl? Hurry up, or I'm giving you a 1-star review. Detection of physical threat to the host confirmed. Temporary access to the special skills library granted. Loading Grandmaster level unrestricted combat. Loading complete. As the system's notification faded, a massive, complex wave of information flooded my brain. Countless muscle memories regarding power distribution, joint weaknesses, and footwear patterns surged into my limbs. I rolled my neck, letting out a sharp crack. That sensation of power and absolute control was an incredible rush. What's the matter, kid? Scared stiff? The blond guy leading them saw me standing still and thought I was paralyzed with fear. He sneered and threw a heavy punch straight at my face. Too slow. In my eyes, his movements looked like a slow-motion replay at half speed. I didn't even move my feet. With a slight tilt of my head, his fist whistled past the tip of my nose. The blond guy blinked, clearly not expecting me to dodge. Before he could react, my hand shot out, clamping onto his wrist with pinpoint precision. I pivoted my hips and yanked downward with explosive force. Act! He screamed as he lost his balance instantly. I sent him over my shoulder in a textbook throw, slamming him hard against the stone pavement. With a dull thud, he curled up on the ground, clutching his back and wheezing, unable to catch his breath. The air in the alley froze. The other guys, who had been acting like tough guys just seconds ago, were stunned. No one expected a tall, lean transfer student like me to strike with such cold efficiency. What are you standing around for? Get him together! Stella screamed from the back, stomping her foot in frustration. They snapped out of it, exchanged a look, and charged at me with a collective roar. I let out a cold laugh and didn't retreat. Instead, I lunged forward to meet them. The system's Grandmaster combat was no joke. Every movement I made was devoid of flashy, useless flair. They were all lethal, efficient strikes. To my left, a chubby kid in a rival school's uniform swung a wild haymaker. I ducked low, letting it sail over me, and simultaneously buried a heavy elbow into his ribs. He let out a pig-like squeal, stumbled back, and collapsed onto his butt. On my right, a tall, lanky guy tried to sneak up behind me. It was as if I had eyes in the back of my head. I spun into a high roundhouse kick that connected squarely with his chest, sending him flying 2 meters back until he hit the wall and slid down. Dodge, parry, punch, sweep. I was like a wolf in a sheepfold, moving through the crowd with ease. In less than 3 minutes, it was over. My leg. Oh God, it hurts. I brushed off some non-existent dust from my hands, my breathing perfectly steady. That's it. I swept a cold gaze over the heap of bodies, my voice dripping with disdain. The only sounds left in the alley were the groans of the fallen and Stella's heavy, ragged breathing. Anyone else? I turned my head toward Stella, who was standing a few meters away. The arrogant, overbearing heiress had completely lost her queen of the school vibe. Her beautiful eyes were wide with shock, confusion, and a flicker of unmistakable fear. As I began walking toward her step by step, Stella instinctively backed away. You stay back. Don't you dare touch me. My father is Jason Xia. If you lay a hand on me, I'll make sure you can't survive in this city. I ignored her threats, a playful smirk tugged at the corner of my mouth as I continued to close the distance at a leisurely pace. As Stella retreated, she looked at the losers on the ground and cursed them 1,000 times in her head. Finally, with a soft thud, her back hit the cold red brick wall. I stopped in front of her, barely half a meter away. Stella's breath was shallow, her chest heaving. I leaned in slightly, and my left hand shot out, slamming against the wall right next to her cheek with a loud thwack, pinning her between my arm and the bricks. We were so close I could smell her perfume, a light blend of high-end citrus and cedar. I could see her long eyelashes trembling and her beautiful face pale from the shock, bringing a crowd to corner me. I leaned down, whispering in her ear with a tone that was 3 parts teasing and 7 parts mockery. Stella bit her lower lip and turned her head away, but a faint pink flush began to creep up her fair neck. I'm just curious. Where's your little lapdog, Leo? Why isn't he here to protect you? Is he too busy for you now? This clearly hit a nerve. Her fearful eyes flared with sudden anger. Shut up. I don't care who he follows. Since when does Stella need his protection? At that moment, I raised my free right hand. Seeing the movement, Stella's pupils shrunk. She instinctively thought I was going to hit her. I simply reached into the pocket of her biker jacket. Stella blinked, her eyes open in confusion, only to see me pulling out her phone. With a click, the Face ID unlocked it instantly. Stella went silent. I opened her messaging app, used my own phone to scan her QR code, and clicked Add to Contacts. Once finished, I slid the phone back in her pocket and took a step back, creating some space between us. You cornered me just to take my phone and add me? Stella was clearly struggling to keep up with my train of thought. What else? Did you think I was going to have my way with you? I arched an eyebrow, scanning her up and down. Get lost. Who would ever want to do that to you? Stella looked like she was about to spit blood from sheer anger. I turned around, shoved my hands back into my pockets, and started walking slowly toward the other end of the alley. Don't you dare delete my contact info. Behind me, Stella's furious scream erupted instantly. Ethan, you freak. Go to hell. Host, I really don't understand your strategy. Aren't we supposed to protect the original female lead? What's the point of flirting with the villainess? If I shift all of Stella's attention onto myself, as long as her curiosity toward me exceeds her jealousy of Chloe. The female lead will naturally be safe. During the afternoon break, as Chloe was heading to get some water, Stella intentionally stuck her long leg out into the aisle. Chloe, clutching her cup, froze in place, her eyes welling up with tears as she stood there trapped. I walked straight over. Without even looking at Chloe, I tapped the tip of my shoe against Stella's sneakers. A good dog doesn't block the path, Miss Stella. If you don't pull them back, I'm stepping on them. My soles are guaranteed fresh. Stella pulled her legs back as if she'd been electrocuted, glaring at me with pure hatred. Ethan, you are disgusting. Chloe took the opportunity to slip back to her seat behind me. Her face was flushed as she whispered, Thank you, Ethan. At that moment, Leo, who had been hiding and watching from the sidelines, finally jumped out. Chloe, are you okay? I'll protect you. I nearly threw up my dinner from last night hearing that. I say, Master Leo, I said, tilting my head and letting the insults fly without mercy. Is your internet connection still on 2G? Your reaction time is measured in business days, isn't it? The poor girl already went through the ringer, and here you're playing Captain Hindsight. If nice guys rank behind dogs, you're stuck somewhere behind a turtle. What are you even doing, pretending to be some big shot wolf in sheep's clothing? Leo's face flushed through a spectrum of colors, from pale to bruised purple. Leo pointed a shaking finger at me, but didn't dare say another word. He had somehow caught wind of my street-fighting reputation and didn't want to risk things getting too ugly. After a few similar skirmishes, Stella seemed to realize that as long as I was around, she wasn't going to get her way. Unfortunately for her, she had no idea how to handle me. So in that not-so-bright head of hers, she finally cooked up a brilliant master plan. Thursday afternoon, PE class. The students from Class 2 rushed toward the playground like a pack of unleashed hounds, leaving the classroom empty within seconds. I used the stomach ache excuse to squat in the restroom for a bit. By the time I slowly meandered back toward the school building, I caught a glimpse of Stella sneaking into the classroom through the back door. I peeked half a head out from the back window. I watched as she pulled out an envelope stuffed with cash and quickly shoved it into the very bottom of Chloe's backpack. Then, like a cat that just stole a fish, she slipped away. Host, the iconic scene is here. The system chirped excitedly. I know. I looked in the direction Stella had vanished and curled my lip. Why else do you think I faked the bathroom break? This was a pivotal plot point from the original story. Stella was supposed to frame Chloe by planting the collected class funds in her bag. In the original timeline, Chloe had no way to prove her innocence. She was isolated by the entire class and nearly dropped out of school. But the most disgusting part was Leo. He actually saw the classroom security footage by chance and knew Stella did it. Yet, to protect Stella while simultaneously trying to swoop in and rescue Chloe, he chose to suppress the truth. He played a sickening game of emotional manipulation, offering Chloe warmth while she was breaking down. Leo really is a piece of work. Cursing him in my mind, I walked into the classroom, unzipped Chloe's bag, and pulled out the envelope of cash. System, today I'm going to show this idiot protagonist what a high-speed investigation looks like. Envelope in hand, I strolled down to the end of the hallway to the homeroom teacher's office. The door was slightly ajar, but she wasn't in. I casually tossed the envelope onto the center of her desk, thoughtfully placed a water mug on top to weigh it down, and then clapped my hands. Mission accomplished. I turned around and headed down to the courts to play some ball. 40 minutes later, PE ended. Everyone returned to the classroom, drenched in sweat. People were heading to the restroom or sitting down to grab a drink when the class monitor suddenly stood up, her voice hitting a high pitch. The class funds I left in my drawer are gone. The room went dead silent. That's over $8,000. We were all at PE just now. No one was in the classroom. Stella made a show of scanning the room, finally locking her gaze onto Chloe. Chloe, I remember you were late for the assembly. Did you come back to the classroom? Chloe's face turned paper white. She waved her hands frantically. I didn't. I went to the restroom. Who can prove that? Your family is so poor you don't even buy a bottle of soda normally. Who knows if you got greedy when you saw the money? Just then, the homeroom teacher walked in with her lesson plans. After hearing what happened, she frowned deeply. This is a serious matter. Chloe, do you mind if I check your bag? Teacher, I really didn't take it. Chloe handed her bag over, tears streaming down her face. A smug, triumphant smirk played on the corner of Stella's mouth. She was already rehearsing the insults she'd hurl when the money fell out. However, the teacher turned Chloe's bag inside out, even feeling through the lining. Aside from textbooks and a few crumpled pieces of scratch paper, not even a penny fell out. The teacher shook her head. It's not in the bag. Stella's smirk froze instantly. Impossible. How can it not be there? She blurted out, her eyes nearly bulging out of her head. I leaned against the doorframe, watching her expression, which looked like she had just swallowed a dead fly, and nearly burst out laughing. Stella, what do you mean by that? What do you mean impossible? Leo stepped forward then, frowning, seemingly thinking this was a good chance to show off his rationality. Since it's not there, it means Chloe didn't take it. By the way, teacher, don't we have cameras in the classroom? We can just check the footage. The moment those words left his mouth, Stella's face went from red to white, then from white to a sickly green. She snapped her head up toward the camera above the blackboard. Once they checked the footage, the entire class would see her planting the money. Stella's body began to tremble uncontrollably, her palms slick with cold sweat. Just as the teacher prepared to call security, I walked in. Are you guys looking for money? The entire class's eyes locked onto me. Stella looked at me like I was her final lifeline. Oh, just that envelope you're talking about, I said, stretching lazily. I got thirsty halfway through PE and came back. I saw an envelope on the floor. I paused intentionally, savoring the way Stella held her breath in extreme tension, then continued. I took it straight to your office. The teacher slapped her forehead. My goodness, I came straight to class after the meeting and haven't been back to the office yet. I'll go check. The suffocating tension in the room evaporated instantly. So Ethan found it. Suddenly, Ethan looks even cooler. I turned my head, giving a half smile to Stella, whose face was still deathly pale. Stella looked at me, biting her lip, unable to say a word. After school, I walked home as usual. As I reached the familiar alleyway entrance, I stopped. Same place, same person. Stella didn't have her usual pack of thugs behind her. She was alone, leaning against the mottled red brick wall. The glow of the setting sun draped over her. Hearing my footsteps, she snapped her head up. Those beautiful eyes locked onto mine instantly. I raised an eyebrow and walked up to her. Well, how is it that the great Miss Stella is all by herself today, ready to skip the talk and just kidnap me for my good looks? Fidgeting under my gaze, she looked away, bit her lower lip, and finally launched. In class today, why did you help me? You clearly knew I planted that money in Chloe's bag. If you had exposed me, I would have been ruined. Why did you say you found it? I took a step forward. Stella instinctively tried to back up, only to realize her back was already against the wall. I didn't expose you because I know you aren't actually a bad person. I looked down into her eyes, my tone more serious than it had ever been. I know about your family. Your parents are first-generation wealthy, busy making money all day. The people around you are either after your money or scared. On the surface, you act like a spoiled brat, but inside, you're more starved for affection than anyone. Everything you do is just like a child who wants candy but can't get it. You're just using the clumsiest, most extreme ways to get someone to notice you. You're talking nonsense. What right do you have to act like you know me so well? If you think I'm not a bad person, then why do you always help Chloe at school? You think she's pure and innocent, so you fell for her? Who told you I was doing it to help Chloe? I asked back. Stella was stunned. Then why do you interfere every time I pick on her? Stella's breath hitched. She instinctively held it. Stella, are you stupid? Don't you know, sometimes a guy just likes to mess with the girl he actually likes? I tilted my head slightly and leaned in, my lips pressed against hers. It was just a light touch, a brief contact without going further. But even that was enough to turn Stella to stone. Her eyes widened, and she stood frozen as if hit by a paralysis spell. She pushed my shoulders back, covering her mouth, her voice trembling beyond recognition. What are you doing? Actually, I lied to you about one thing earlier. Stella looked at me blankly, still covering her mouth. I stopped you at school because I really don't want you bullying Chloe, because I don't want you to become the bad girl in everyone else's eyes. You don't need to be jealous of anyone, because in my heart, you'll always be the most special one. I like you, Stella. Hearing that blunt, unreserved confession, Stella looked like she'd been struck by lightning. She was completely dazed. Then, the normally domineering young lady suddenly shoved me away. Like a rabbit that had its tail stepped on, she turned and bolted down the alley. As she ran, she threw back a shrill, embarrassed cry without looking back. Ethan, you're a freaking psycho. The era of the tsundere is over. We are now in the age of the shy and sweet. Host, I have to admit, you've actually got some real talent. The power of the author isn't something you should try to learn. If the cops come and haul me away for it, that's on me, not you. Question mark. Host, what are you even talking about? Ever since that direct confession in the alleyway, Stella, that little spitfire, had been completely under my thumb. The most obvious sign was that she stopped giving Chloe any trouble. Not only that, but I had taken the opportunity to give her a little suggestion. Aren't you afraid of Chloe stealing your spotlight? There's actually a much more high-level way to handle this. Just recruit her. Make her your little sidekick. That way, you keep the spotlight, and it makes you look like a big-hearted lady with class. At first, Stella just let out a classic huff, muttering, "Who would ever want to be friends with her?" But she turned around and put the plan into action immediately. As it turned out, the innocent flower of the original novel wasn't just submissive. She was also incredibly insecure. Faced with Stella's sudden, slightly overbearing tokens of friendship, Chloe was initially as terrified as a shivering quail. However, she quickly realized that Stella didn't actually harbor any malice. In less than 2 days, Chloe had genuinely and wholeheartedly accepted Stella's friendship, even becoming something of shadow to her. Home invasion friendship certainly sounded a lot more legal than home invasion romance. "Hey, Ethan." During a break between classes, Stella noticed no one was around and hurried over to my desk. Like a child seeking praise, she lowered her voice and started bragging. "That idea of yours actually worked. Chloe is honestly just a dummy. I bought her some snacks and had her explain 2 math problems to me. And today, she actually stuttered and called me Big Sis. Look at how well she listens to me now." Seeing the pride she couldn't hide in her eyes, I couldn't help but reach out and ruffle her hair. "Good job. I told you our Stella is beautiful and kind-hearted. Look at you, showing off that big-picture mindset. Ooh, who is yours? Keep your hands to yourself." Stella swatted my hand away, but a flush quickly crept across her cheeks. She wasn't actually angry. I leaned back in my chair, glancing over at Leo, who was currently trying to strike up a conversation with Chloe. It was time for the next step of my instigation master plan. "By the way, since Chloe is under your protection now, shouldn't you, as the boss, keep an eye on who your subordinate is hanging out with?" I pointed toward Leo with a half-smile. Stella followed my gaze, and her eyebrows immediately knitted together. "Look at Leo," I continued, fanning the flames. "A while ago, he was following you around like a dog every single day. You've only been ignoring him for a few days, and he's already turned around to hit on Chloe. It's obvious he wants to have his cake, and eat it too. He's just trying to play both sides." Stella never truly liked Leo to begin with. Now, hearing my perspective, she found him more and more repulsive. Her favorability toward him plummeted into the negatives. How gross. How did I never notice how pathetic he is? Stella rolled her eyes in disgust. "Exactly," I said, leading her on. "Chloe is so innocent. She doesn't know the first thing about spotting a scumbag. As her big sis, shouldn't you give her heads up? You don't want her getting tricked by a two-faced hypocrite like that, do you?" "You're right." Stella nodded solemnly, her sense of justice exploding. "How could I let a scumbag like that ruin someone under my wing?" With that, she stomped back to her seat with an aggressive aura. A moment later, I saw Stella pull Chloe aside. She pointed at Leo in the distance and started whispering. Chloe looked stunned as she listened, and when she looked back at Leo, her eyes were filled with a clear sense of wariness. When Leo eventually approached Chloe again, putting on a suave, gentlemanly act while holding a math problem, Chloe shrunk behind Stella as if she were avoiding a plague victim. "Leo, I have to tutor Stella right now. You should probably ask someone else." Leo froze on the spot, his face looking worse than if he had just swallowed a fly. "Host." The system let out a long sigh in my mind. I feel like I've spent all these years being a system for nothing. "Keep taking notes, buddy." Time flew by. Under my daily guidance, or rather, my careful instigation, Stella found Leo more and more irritating. Whenever Leo came within 3 meters of her in class, she would wave her hand in front of her nose as if she smelled something foul. And as Stella's #1 fangirl, Chloe naturally followed her lead. As a result, she also began to treat Leo with extreme coldness. In the original novel, Leo was supposed to be the male lead who played both girls against each other, thriving in the drama. Now, he had been forced into the role of a class pariah. Every time he tried to act deep or cool, he was met with Stella's eye rolls and Chloe's avoidance. Ding! Detection shows that the original female lead Chloe's safety index has reached 100%. The tragic romance plot has been completely shattered. Mission accomplished. One afternoon, the system's lively voice rang out in my mind, sounding almost incredulous. Host, you're incredible. You didn't just turn the villainess into your girlfriend. You turned the villainess into the female lead's protector. This reverse play is legendary. I'm definitely applying for a special merit award for you when I get back to headquarters. I smiled, keeping my achievements a silent secret. In the blink of an eye, graduation day arrived. The entire school was filled with the bittersweet sting of parting and the restless energy of the future. Students were taking photos on the field and signing each other's uniforms. I was leaning against a tree, drinking water, when a small, fair hand suddenly tugged at my sleeve. I turned to see Stella. Today, she wasn't wearing her signature biker jacket. Instead, she wore a crisp, clean white shirt, and her legs looked long and straight under her pleated skirt. Ethan, come with me. Before I could say a word, she blushed and grabbed my wrist, pulling me all the way out of the school gates. After a few twists and turns, we stopped at a very familiar place. It was the same alleyway where she had once led a gang to corner me. The glow of the setting sun was just like it had been that day, painting the red brick walls of the alley a deep crimson. The only difference was that the arrogant, untouchable young miss of the past was now standing with her head bowed, her hands twisting nervously, her ears so red they looked like they might bleed. The alley was silent, save for the sound of our breathing. What did you bring me here for? I leaned against the wall, hands in my pockets, looking at her even though I already knew the answer. What's this? Has the great Stella finally lost her patience and decided to finish that shakedown on graduation day? Be serious. Stella glared at me, flustered, but her eyes lacked their old sting. Instead, they were watery, almost pleading. She took a deep breath, as if gathering an immense amount of courage. She looked up directly into my eyes, her voice trembling with the anxiety of a young girl. Ethan, what you told me back then, in this alley, does it still count? Which part? The part where I told you to take off your white socks. I teased, struggling to hold back a laugh. That was in the classroom. Stop interrupting. Stella stomped her foot in frustration, her cheeks puffing out. Finally, she couldn't help but ask shyly, It's about whether you still like me. Seeing her so nervous that she couldn't even keep her breathing steady, I dropped the joking act. My gaze softened. I stepped forward, gently pinching her cheek, which was burning from nerves. I told you, in my heart, you will always be the most special one. This somewhat poetic line clearly wasn't enough to satisfy her need for security. Stella wrinkled her nose and pouted, her inner tsundere flaring up one last time at this critical moment. She pressed for an answer. So do you like me or not? Looking at her stunning face, so close to mine, I couldn't hold back any longer. I leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. Then, looking in her eyes, I spoke slowly and with absolute sincerity. I like you. Hearing those words, the anxiety in Stella's eyes vanished instantly, replaced by an uncontrollable joy. Her eyes curved into crescents as she beamed. Her slender arms wrapped around my waist, and she buried her face in my chest. Her voice was so sweet it practically melted. Hee, Ethan, I like you too. The setting sun stretched our shadows long against the ground. In this alleyway where we had once stood as enemies, we finally wrote the perfect ending.